Are you a custodial parent or a non-custodial parent? What is a custodial parent? What is a non-custodial parent? What are you? Do you know what you are? Have you read your court orders? Let's go over what the difference is between a custodial parent and a non-custodial parent in the eyes of the state of Texas. I mean, come on. A lot of people are under the assumption that custodial parents just can pick every exclusive right for the child, and it's not like that. You shouldn't be mandated to hire an attorney to go to family court to uphold your rights when it's on a piece of paper, it's signed by a judge, and law enforcement statutorily can enforce it. Okay, here's a little homework for you. Go get your court orders and look at your court orders and find out what you are, because I'm going to almost guarantee that there is no section in your court order that says that you're a custodial or a non-custodial parent. So let me just read over a few paragraphs in which I found on the internet. In the Texas Family Code, the term custodial parent is not explicitly defined, but the concept is generally understood through related legal terms. The custodial parent is the parent who has been granted the right to designate the primary residence of the child, also referred to as the primary managing conservator. Okay, so if you've gone and you've looked at your court orders, right, you should see whether you're a sole managing, a joint managing, or a possessory managing conservator for the most parts. We just went over what a managing conservator is. So let me read you what a joint managing conservator is. In Texas, a joint managing conservator is a legal designation given to both parents or sometimes others in a child custody case. It means that both parties share in the rights and responsibilities of raising the child, including making important decisions about the child's welfare. Now, this can all be found in Chapter 153 of the Texas Family Code. This shared parenting is not really shared parenting if you're a non-custodial parent. As we all know, a lot of difficulties the non-custodial parent has is that they're unable to get any information out of the custodial parent. They're unable to get medical records from doctors' offices. Sometimes doctors won't even talk to them because the custodial parent said that they're in charge. Okay. And so joint managing conservator is the sharing of the responsibilities to the child. So let's go over what a possessory conservator is. The non-custodial parent is usually the possessory conservator that is granted specific visitation or possession times as per Texas Family Code 153.006 and 153.192. The custodial parent, the managing conservator, or the custodial parent, has the following exclusive rights unless limited by the court. Exclusive rights unless limited by the court. This is where you need to go and look at your court orders, and you need to see if it says George Saldana has a right, or George Saldana has an exclusive right, or you have an independent right, to determine what your rights are. While the Family Code doesn't explicitly define custodial parent as a standalone term, it uses the concept within the framework of managing conservatorship and possession and access rights. So as I just stated, and the internet has stated it, I've looked for it, there's no definition for custodial or non-custodial. So stop calling yourself a custodial or non-custodial parent, and stop thinking that custodial parents have all the rights. So let's go down to Texas Family Code 153.073. Rights of parents at all times, unless limited by a court order. Unless you are limited by the court order, a parent appointed as a conservator of the child has at all times the right, and that's the key word, the right. What does right mean? Means an entitlement. The right to receive information from any other conservator of the child concerning the child's health, right? That's just the right to receive that information. You have that right. You have the right to confer with the other parent. You have the right to access medical and dental, the right to consult with the physician, to consult with the school activities, and so on. It's all listed right here in Texas Family Code 153.073, right? So it doesn't say custodial, it doesn't say non-custodial. It says conservator of the child. Again, go to your court order, see what it says, and go from there. Rights and duties during periods of possession for those non-custodial parents, right? Because some of us are joint managing conservators. We have periods of possession and access, which equals visitation as defined in the family code. But your rights and duties during periods of possession. Let's go over this because this is very, very, very important. This helps you understand what your rights and your duties are. We already said a right is an entitlement. A duty is an obligation, something you are obligated to do. So let's dive deeper into rights and duties during your periods of possession. Okay. And when I talk about your periods of possession, I'm talking about visitation. You picking up little Johnny first, third, and fifth at 6 o'clock or on Thursdays after school, right? All of this is highlighted in your court order. It says you have a right. It says you have a duty. Let's go over it. Rights and duties during periods of possession. Unless limited by a court order, unless the court order says you can't do it, you're limited. A parent appointed as a conservator of the child has the following rights and duties during the period that parent has possession of the child. Right? Do I need to explain that anymore? Okay, great. The duty for care, control, protection, and reasonable discipline of the child. Now, this is different. We talked about rights. This is a duty. A duty and a right are two different things. A duty is an obligation, imposes an obligation. Right is an entitlement. So some things you're entitled to and some things you're obligated to do. Does that make sense? So when it says you have a duty for care, control, and protection and reasonable discipline of the child during your periods of possession, this is where I try to hunker down when I'm talking about interference with child custody. Interference with child custody, when the person knows that the person's taking or retention is in violation of a court order or judgment, including temporary order. So when you show up to pick up little Johnny Friday, 6 o'clock, and the child is not there, your ex is not there, nobody's answering the door. This is something I've lived with for years. You have a duty for care, control, and protection of that child with reasonable discipline. But what I'm trying to harp on is you have a duty, which is an obligation for care, control, and protection. If you scroll down to number 2 in 153.074, it'll say you have a duty to support your child. So just like they'll come after you for child support because they'll say you have a duty, you're obligated to support that child. You have a duty to support that child on and off your possession and access periods, your visitation periods, right? So if you have a duty to support your child, you also have a duty for care, control, and protection. If that child is not at the location that you're supposed to do a parental swap at, okay, it's your duty to call law enforcement. Now, one of the things that I've seen is judges get upset when parents call law enforcement to enforce their court order. I've made videos about it where it says it's statutory required, which means the law says it's required that in every court order, it must say, notice to all peace officers, you may use reasonable efforts to enforce this court order. Calling law enforcement to have your rights enforced, it should not be held against you in a family court. We know it does, though. And judges are now telling parents, don't call law enforcement when you have a issue with possession and access. Now that right there seems to be harmful because now that is making you hire an attorney or become pro se to file an enforcement action. Since law enforcement won't enforce it and judges are telling you not to call law enforcement, bring it back to family court, a lot of these judges are putting a financial strain or a hardship on these families that can't afford legal help or may not have the mental capacity to represent themselves pro se. So which means the other parent gets off scot-free just by keeping the child away. So back to custodial versus non-custodial, joint managing, possessory managing, you really have to look at your court order and you really need to define what you are. And then when you define what you are, if you're a joint, if you're a sole managing, possessory, whatever you are, go from there. Look at your court order. Wherever it says you have a right, that means you're entitled to that. You can have that, right? Just like you're entitled to walk down the street. If it says you have a duty, you have a duty. It's an obligation. You are obligated by that court order for care, control, and to protect that child. So if that child is not at the location for the parental swap, it is your duty to call law enforcement and make a report. Whether law enforcement wants to enforce that or not, that's for another video. Some of y'all know I'm big on interference with child custody. I've had the FBI have to look for my child. This can also run into a missing child's report. That's for another video. But a missing child is whose whereabouts are unknown to the child's legal custodian. If you're a joint managing conservator, you don't know where your child is, you have the duty for care, control, and protection of that child with reasonable discipline. You are obligated. You are obligated to protect that child. So we went over what a custodial versus non-custodial. It's not defined, which means it's not there. It's fabricated. It's just words that people use, right? But in order to label yourself correctly, to define your rights, the only thing that defines a custodial from a non-custodial parent, per se, is where the child lives. That's it. That is it. Doesn't say that the custodial has more powers at school. Doesn't say that the custodial can make more medical decisions, right? You're a joint managing conservator. Both parents have that right to make those decisions, and they're able to make those decisions within their periods of possession. So therefore, look at your court orders, define what you are, so that way you're able to move forward with your rights. When you're talking to your lawyer, tell them, hey, look, I have a duty for care, control, and protection of my child. If my child is in danger, it is my duty to protect them. And it's my duty to call law enforcement to help me protect my children. Now, judges that tell you not to call law enforcement, I think that's troubling. I think that's a bad tactic because those are your fundamental rights to your children. The judge has also signed that order. So now, in essence, the judge is telling you not to enforce their court order. Pay money, come see me, and I'll enforce it if I enforce it. And that seems to be the underlying problem. I hope this video was able to define a little bit the differences between a custodial and a non-custodial parent. I hope this video was helpful, and I hope you're able to use this knowledge in your journey trying to see your children with a valid court order. Thanks for watching, and let me know if I can hit other topics you might like to hear.